Good evening. My name is Michael Ryan and welcome to the Finance Value Chamber. I'm here this evening on a glorious evening at Old Trafford and I'm joined by two of the finest minds in finance and data science. On my left-hand side here, I'm joined by Gary Cole, who's the CEO of data science experts Lumilinks. And on my right-hand side, I'm joined by Martin Kirby, who's head of credit and collections at Business Stream. We're going to actually get to the bottom of the question. Is data the new oil? Or is it all just, it isn't? So first of all, Gary, would you like to introduce yourself to the crowd?
Of course, thanks. Gary Cole, CEO of Lumilinks. We're a 30-strong remote business, which used to be cool before COVID, and then COVID came along and most people did it. But we are based out of Cambridge. Spent the first part of the business working out what data analytics is. I can be a little bit controversial, but hopefully the change is coming. As I say, it's not coming, it's here, and hopefully can give you a bit of insight around what that actually means, because there's a lot of myths owned by the market, that, and particularly in the marketing side of the market, about what actually AI and data science is.
Thanks very much, Gary. Martin, can you give an introduction to the crowd and explain your interest in the topic?
Yeah, for sure. So Martin Kirby, been in order to cash for many, many years, working for Scottish Water Business Stream. My interest in AI and the development of AI has always been around data. It's always been around what can we actually do with some of the stuff that we actually don't see but is invisibly there as well. And I think today we'll have a couple of good discussions on some great examples that we've worked on, and I've worked on some stuff with Gary as well on data, and trying to look at the perception of that role, or my role, a finance role, typically in a different way, trying to flip it on its head a little bit.
Okay. Thanks very much, Martin. I think actually, to be honest with you, for those of us who are potentially Luddites, I'm going to ask Gary to actually explain a few terms. Let's actually just go back to basics here. So what is artificial intelligence, machine learning, chat, GTP, and all of that? What is it? Tell us.
In terms of business, it doesn't mean lots. Majority of businesses don't use it. And that's going to be for a little while. Effectively, there are some really cutting-edge technologies that go through cleansed data, machine learning, and then into AI. And I think the piece where I'm going to be a bit controversial is part of the market is utilising the phrase, and the phrase is quite encapsulating. It enables us to pay attention and actually try and understand. But the phrase of it is a grouped term that people do to capture our attention.
And Martin, since you've been studying this in the background practically for as long as I've known you, how would you interpret it?
I really believe it's the catalyst to really accelerate A, your learning, and B, your output. And you've got to enable it like that. I don't think it's going to take over jobs. We had some talk about that earlier. I think it's going to enhance jobs and going to really make them go really fast. And so certainly that output's really fast. We talked a lot earlier about risk as well. I think, unfortunately, with AI or machine learning, we start to bring another layer of risk in, which is called cybersecurity. And I think with this industry, we're starting to generate different risks and different associations. And my brother-in-law is fortunately works for IBM, so he's an IBMer, for whoever talked about that earlier. And he's blockchain lead. And the only question he ever asks me around AI is, what happens when you've put that data in the AI model? Who owns the data? Because they're all about who owns the data. So data is the new oil. Who owns the data? Do you actually own the data when you've put it into that model? But those are some of the things, the provocative things, I think, which we could discuss today at sort of length.
Okay. And I believe, Gary, you were at London Tech Week earlier this week, right? What did you learn?
Quite a lot. In the sense that I'm actually a massive fan of the fact that the UK are trying to talk about AI regulation and those type of things as well. And if I come back slightly from my piece around marketing, effectively, and to Martin's point, for me, a lot of the points that we've heard from people today about data observability. So actually what we're trying to do is we're trying to empower businesses to automate processes. If you try and fix the data in your systems, you're going to be doing it for a long time. There's going to be a lot of nervousness. There's going to be a lot of pain. It's not about fixing the data in your system. It's about giving visibility of data across a business in that sense. And I think that's ultimately, there are some really big players that, and same with the, do you buy a new system to get data analytics? And the answer is, in my case, normally no. Because actually there's a lot cheaper way to go about it. There's a way to go about it in a way that takes a use case of a business and says, actually, I want to know how to dispose of my assets. I want to know how to target my customers. I want to know how to empower the person in finance to be able to make faster decisions on clean data. And I can tell you one thing, it's not about going back to your source system and creating a new process, because there is always another process. Your business is constantly evolving. There are other ways to do it that are significantly faster, significantly cheaper, and it eventually puts power in your own business to actually, because that data, you don't want to send your transactional data out to suppliers. You don't want to send, your IP out to suppliers. You want to build that intelligence. And those are the things that actually, when people talk about AI and machine learning, that really, for me, is the underlying message, is that the technology is changing very fast, and it's going to enable you to do things differently. And at the moment, we're still in this phase of looking at things traditionally, and that's the part of the market that's going to change very quickly. And we have a huge amount of businesses, enterprise businesses, where their life cycle was a lot less than it used to be. People used to talk about that, about the FTSEs, the big companies, about the life cycle reducing. That's actually happening in the enterprise space. It's because people are actually coming into the space where they're using automation and they're able to act a lot faster.
For those of you who are only meeting Gary today for the first time, Gary has moved into the finance transformation space over the course of the last 3 years, yeah? So, given that you're talking to a finance audience and you've listened to what's been said across the course of the conference today, what are you thinking based on all the challenges that they've explained and the examples that they've got? What strikes you as going, well, actually, I could solve that, or I could do that differently, or I've got something that, they're not aware of the capability of? Have you any examples you could...
Great question, thank you. And there are good people we've heard of today that have talked about their point solutions in how they solve practices for businesses, and really that's the kind of direction here that I'm going to take. Is that we've heard about when you need to change a business system, which you do, by the way. There's times where you really have to change that business system. But if that point isn't the case, there are points around the fact of how do you create visibility across the business about your AP processes? How do you go down some of the examples that we've gone through today? My piece is that I'm a specialist generalist. I don't work in a particular sector. I work across sectors because actually there's loads of good practices that actually lots of businesses can adapt from each other. But what I'm very good at is data. Or I shouldn't say that. What my team are very good at is data. And effectively, that's the piece that I think is that challenge yourself to say, actually, as we talked about with ChatGPT earlier, ChatGPT empowers people. And it's no different to, the image recognition piece about creating AI imagery. But Adobe Cloud kind of changed the market a few years ago. This is just about upskilling people. But there's always going to need to be a specialism, because that's why businesses succeed, because they specialize in something. And I think that looking at the market and trying to understand actually what data analytics is. Data analytics is not buying the latest system. It's not utilizing Power BI. Once you fix the transactional data, there's 3 levels of analytics. One is hindsight, which is looking back at the business. Most businesses would probably say our data's terrible and we're still struggling to try and get hindsight done. But actually, if you want to move into the terminology of machine learning and AI, you have to get into predictive analytics. You have to then get into prescriptive analytics. And without going to prescription, which is, what should I do? Actually, we have to go through a format change. And the format change is no longer reporting on KPIs, because reporting goes upwards. And then someone says, well, is that right? And it takes you so long to work out, or someone spent till 10 o'clock at night actually creating their reports. You have to get to a point where you review KPIs, where it's already predicted by a system. That system is no longer out of reach. It is out of reach if you try and build that in an ERP system. It is not out of reach if you utilize Snowflake, BigQuery, Databricks. There are some great systems where storage is really cheap. You're talking like £30 a terabyte. So instead of fixing the system, which is going to take years and it's going to take pain, take a copy of the data, put it into a system, enrich it with the Office of National Statistics data, enrich it with demographic data, because you pay huge sums of money for these data sets that are open source, and actually part of the goal actually is there's a huge amount and wealth of data. If you look at things differently, you can make really informed decisions really quickly. And me and Mark, I've worked with various people in the room. Chris with the Glasgow and Edinburgh Airport around COVID, Mark on a logistics firm, and part of the pain with going through, which they had to do a change of system, actually we worked alongside that business, and within the 4 months, we'd found £10 million worth of savings from their old 1980 system, and actually that pays for itself. And I think that's part of the process. Is this the pieces I'm talking about cost tens of thousands of pounds, not millions. And I think that's the advantage. And it's understanding what's available in the market that really gives people the power to create insight.
Okay. One of the things that interests me in relation to chatting to yourself and as a team which has run through the course of today is, as indeed the session we had with Mark on selecting an ERP system, the life cycle of the selection process and indeed its implementation is quite lengthy. It's relatively lengthy. It's measured in months, 6-9 months, and keep on going. You're talking about keep the ERP system. I'll work with the data that's within it, and I'll give you the results and the answers to the business question that you're looking for. Give us some perspective on the speed difference in terms of you delivering a result like that versus Mark, for instance, going through the full life cycle of speccing you a new ERP and its selection process.
Yeah, great question. As I say, this is not about not choosing the time when you need to do the ERP, but it's not a case of we're changing ERP because we need better insight into our data. If the ERP system holds your data well, that is enough in that kind of process. And so I'll give you an example of a finance company. A finance company went to, I'll say it, they went to Microsoft and they took their recommendation on how to build a data warehouse platform. That data warehouse platform took them 18 months and the cost was over £500,000. And in that time frame, we came in and did a bit of consultancy, and I asked what was the business case, because the platform they build is a machine learning business case. I said, do you have any machine learning business cases? And they didn't. Why have you built this platform? Because that's what, if you look at guidance, recommendations, that's the platform. And so I said, what was the actual use case? Well, we want to be able to provide reports to our clients. Okay? How would we do? Should we go through that? And we did that within 2 months. So their client now has a visualized report. So Power BI is a great tool, by the way. And I say, all tools I'm talking about are actually great tools. I'm trying to be a little bit controversial so that we can understand the context. Power BI is a great tool. I personally think Power BI is a great tool for visualization. You build analytics in a warehouse. It automatically can be cleaned in a warehouse. There's a slight change between ELT and ETL. It's slightly technical, and we can definitely go into that later if we've got chance. But the purpose being that we are able to gather the data from 3 different source systems, we were able to put it into a warehouse, and we were able to automate it and visualize it in Power BI. It was a great service, and their clients were really happy. And obviously the reason they were doing it is because they were getting competitors come in, offering them insight and those type of things. And that, like I say, the time difference of that is a few months, and that's the difference in the opportunity in the market today. Is there's a huge amount of opportunity to cleanse data in a not in a source system, in a system that sits alongside. This is still your data, by the way. You can get an operator to run a data warehouse for you, but there's no reason it can't sit in your tenancy. And so being able to bring the data, keep the data in your tenancy, and be able to then manipulate it in a way to provide reports is a really quick process.
So obviously speed is one of the key advantages here, and indeed one of the things that ran through this morning's discussion was the pace of change. So we're all engaged in how change management is delivered and how we can actually get it absorbed and successfully delivered. Is the pace of change of technology in terms of what it can do going too fast for us and we can't keep up with it? Martin?
I think you just need to open your mind to that a little bit. So it is there, like Gary said earlier, and you just have to accept that it's going to help you accelerate that earlier. So if you're going to close your mind to it and want to do it in the traditional way, that's fine. But if you're doing projects, and we've talked about use cases today, we've talked about audits today, but if you're doing projects, your research ability utilizing the new tools is going to be so much faster. You could take a week before to do research on what is the priority to do a use case to do this. You'll get that in minutes, and you'll be able to validate that in minutes as well. So open your minds up to the new tool. Don't let them go.